Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Mesh with Willamette Week. Today, we are meeting with the Portland Public Schools Board candidates for Zone 6, if I'm not mistaken. Good, I got that right. It would be
Yes.
embarrassing to have this intro be wrong. So the three of you are seeking this position, which is currently held by the incumbent, Julia Brim-Edwards. Julia, as the incumbent, we're going to give you the chance to introduce yourself first.
Sure. Would you like me to say why I'm running, or just the 3 sentences who I am?
No, I take 3 or 4 minutes and tell us why you're running.
Great. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm Julia Brim-Edwards. I'm a Portland Public School alum. I also was a parent in PPS for 18 years, and I've spent about 25 years working to improve Portland schools. And I'm glad you framed this as it's somewhat of a job interview, because I think job interviews often are based on what individuals have done, and why would you hire them? What's their track record? So I think it's worth reviewing what my track record has been. And I think generally the results I've produced over the last 4 years have been positive for our students. And 4 years ago, when I sat in the room, but physically sat in the room with you all, and made the case for why I was running for the school board, I shared sort of the context in which I was running, which was, at the time, the district leadership and the central office were in crisis. And frankly, the district was severely off track. We'd had the exit of a longtime superintendent due to the lead in the water crisis. We had too many students of color not getting the supports they needed. There had been a superintendent recruitment that was a colossal failure. There had been rotating interim superintendents in the board. There was a lot of discord and dysfunction on the board. You had half the board calling for other board members to resign. We had crumbling school infrastructures, dangerous lead, radon, and asbestos in our schools. We had students in middle grades getting an inequitable middle school experience, and transparency and accountability were low, including the elimination of the internal auditor's position, and also a lack of policy guiding a whole host of things, including adult conduct with students. And there was at that time, there had been the report about Mitch Whiter's 2 decades of misconduct in PPS. And so at the time, I think I said that I was going to provide leadership working with the other board members to get the district back on track. And I think I've done that. I led the national superintendent recruitment that brought Superintendent Guerrero to PPS, and did that before the start of school. In 42 days, we ran a very tightly focused recruitment to bring somebody here. I also brought the board together, a board that didn't agree on a lot of things, but brought them together around a common student-focused agenda. We also reinstated the Office of the Internal Performance Auditor, and have 2 internal performance auditors. In addition, I played a leadership role in passing the district's local option, which provides for 900 teachers annually. In addition, just this last November, I chaired the 2020 school bond, which will continue the improvements, and both on the health and safety and the accessibility side, but also the modernization of our schools. I also played a key role with the passing the landmark Student Success Act. And the Student Success Act, in addition to how we've structured our budget, we've focused more of our resources now on our students most in need, and the Black, Indigenous, and students of color, special ed students who need additional instructional supports, social emotional supports, more counselors, social workers in the schools. And so really set up I think set the district, got the district back on track. We also changed the superintendent's evaluation so that we're evaluating the superintendent in part on the growth and the performance of students that historically have not been well served by the district. In addition, within the first year, we also moved to open two middle schools, Harriet Tubman and Roseway Heights. And so that those students in those areas would have a much more equitable middle grades experience. Then we're, of course, going to be opening Kellogg this fall for another 600 students to have a much better and more equitable middle grades experience. So I feel like during my first 3 years on the board, we got the district back on track, built the systems and accountability and transparency, built in the budgetary supports for our students so that our teachers and school staff can do what they do best, which is teach our kids. And then COVID hit, and this has been an unprecedented year of really moving our entire district, almost 50,000 students, to comprehensive distance learning and now to reopening our schools. And I will say that when you when the district has had its biggest challenges over the last 2 decades, I've been a person who stepped up to work with parents, teachers, school staff, community members, to improve our schools, to tackle whatever the biggest issue of the day was. And I think we're, with coming out of COVID, the COVID recovery, and getting our students back in school, I think now is the time that we need experienced leadership, and that's what I'll offer. And I want to say I appreciate Max and Libby both stepping up to run, because serving on the school board is, I think, the sort of the ultimate community service. And as parents, I think we all want our kids to be well served, and we want PPS to be strong. So I just thank them both for stepping up, because it's not everybody's willing to do it. Lots of critics, but not always those willing to step up. So thanks. And I think the district would say I've been one of the harshest critics and held them accountable when it's appropriate, but I've been also one of the biggest supporters. And I hope that Willamette Week will endorse me and recognize the work that I've done for the last 4 years on behalf of the students of the district.
Thank you. Going in alphabetical order, Libby, why don't you give us an introduction, please?
Hi, my name is Libby Glenn. I'm also an alum of PPS, attending Benson High School, well, Clark Elementary, Bensmead Middle School, and then Benson Polytechnic. My full run. I have a daughter who is currently a Portland Public School student. She is in 5th grade Spanish immersion. I believe that the main reason I'm running is because of the wanting to further explore like the communication issues between the district and the parents and the students, and to further student engagement. As you know, the students of color, there has been like a great disparity between white students and students of color in the district. I commend Julia for working the last 4 years really hard. I wasn't even aware if Julia was going to be running again, and it was a last minute decision on my part. I guess I wanted the experience and the opportunity to give back to the school district that gave so much to me. Because I do feel like, I greatly benefited from my education with Portland Public Schools, but I wanted that to be something that's available to all students. I had a disappointing moment where I had attended a school board meeting a few years ago when we were still doing things in person. And it was over the continuing of the police contract with the district, which the district later dropped after the George Floyd incident. But what was disappointing is that person after person of color stood up and asked the district to just delay a vote. And they refused to delay a vote because they said they had the representative from the police department there, or the police bureau, that evening. So I'm wondering, like, I think, you know, I would like to see greater engagement between different groups of people in the city, different communities, whether that be done by zone or other means, but that the parental forums and listening, proactive listening, needs to be done to a greater level by the school board. And Julia, thank you for your compliment.
I made the mistake of muting myself.
Yeah, I thought I lost the connection.
No, Max, can you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Max Margolis. I've lived in Portland since 1997. I have a daughter who is in middle school in Portland Public Schools. And I guess let's just get to it. Why am I running? Back in February during the snowstorm, read an article, saw that nobody was running for the board. $10 to get into a participatory, democracy, decided to join, but I do have a history. I was my daughter went to Vestal for first through half of second grade. I was the vice president of the PTA there, worked to get 2 classrooms remediated. But then we had to leave Vestal. And part of the experience that a lot of families in my area have is because of decisions made during the Vicki Phillips era, where they made Vestal a K-8 school. And I think the 2 biggest issues I have are, first, the response to the audit from the Secretary of State, and then also the Reimagine Portland document itself, that is the guiding North Star of the district. And it is not a serious document, in my opinion. It mirrors a zodiac map, and it's unclear, and there's no measurements with it. And if you read the strategic plans from the district, it also has the same sort of problems with it. So I am running just to provide, I think there's a narrative missing with the school board. I think we hear rhetoric, but parents on the ground don't see the action. And I just look forward to having a discussion, explaining more of my point of view. And I can tell you more about my work history if you want, but I feel like, people are ready to kind of talk about the issues affecting parents. And I really appreciate what Julia said, and I'm thankful for you having the panel today.
Sure. Max, can you tell us why you feel like you'd be an improvement over the incumbent? I'm not a super connected person. Julia didn't like this when I said it at the interview, but she's a corporate lobbyist. And I think that point of view has been in the board for a long period of time. And the decisions that were made by her, have affected my family and my neighborhood. I mean, nobody in my block goes to the school. I think my experience mirrors a lot of parents, like Wrigler, where the audit report talks about that experience. I'm a good listener. I've worked with students my whole life. When I first moved here, I worked with adjudicated youth at the Morrison Center. I ran a drug prevention program where I went into schools in Portland, all over the state, to give presentations. I can tell you that kids aren't very excited to listen to someone speak like that, but I can be engaging. I can listen to people. I've written grants. I've gone to Washington, D.C. to get support for my grants. I have experience, but I'm also a parent, and I'm a reading tutor right now, and I see the disparity in the district, and I'm willing to say, like, Portland has a huge problem. We have the widest achievement gap in the state, and we have to own that issue and really start to fix it. So I feel like I'm fresh blood and a fresh perspective. Libby, you want to tell us why you feel like you'd be an improvement over the incumbent?
Yeah, I have, a lot of time on my hands. I'm not tied to any corporate interest. I, again, also with our immediate school, encountered a difficult situation a couple years ago with the district where, yeah, we saw a lot of, families leave the district. And then, again, this continues to be a cycle. And I don't want to see Portland Public Schools fall apart, because my other recent example was I attended college in Dallas, Texas. And so I got to learn a little bit about Dallas public schools, and that a lot of families had just left. So it had become like a very poor school district that it was not, properly funded. And so it was a sad scenario. And I don't want to see Portland Public Schools end up in that same position. I know that we can do better. I don't pretend to, I know that this is a difficult job and this is a difficult volunteer job. And I know that Julia has spent a lot of hours along with many others in this volunteer position. But, this is a position of privilege and a lot of people don't have access to this privilege. I mean, I barely have access to this privilege. And I think that's like something to keep in mind is that I really have a heart for the people that live in this city that are not white, because their plight has not been the same as ours. They do not live in the same bubble that we live in. They live in a total different reality and they deserve better. And every student in Portland Public Schools should be achieving the same high standards, but they're not. And I would like to see that change.
Thank you. Julia, you want to respond to both the implicit and explicit criticisms?
Sure. I don't think it was, I think both candidates stated reasons why they feel they would be better than me, and that's not necessarily a criticism of me. I think more of the things that they would bring to the board, and all candidates bring different things to the board. But at the specific criticism, it's just disappointing, Max, that you continue to name call. I think you wrote a piece about how proud you were to be a stay-at-home dad, and I'm assuming your spouse is working, and yeah, I have a job and I support my family, and I don't think there's anything in conflict with that and my board service, and I think my track record reflects that. And I just I wonder if you are pointing that out because you haven't actually been in the trenches with other parents citywide to improve our schools. So I hope you would elevate your game and speak about why you would do things differently and to improve schools and what you've done versus just attacking me for what I do professionally and to support my family.
You are a lobbyist.
I'm not a registered lobbyist.
No?
I'm not.
Okay.
I have been at times in the past, but I'm not currently a registered lobbyist. I follow very strictly the rules of the current nature of my job is that I'm not a registered lobbyist. I haven't been to Salem for maybe 4 years.
Well, I mean, I guess
3 years. I'm sorry. Go back to 2019.
I guess I'm surprised you take umbrage at this.
No, I just think it's.
I would imagine if you work for Nike, you like working for Nike.
I do like working for Nike. I think he's and it's also based on things that has said in past interviews. So I think he should elevate his game and speak about why, instead of if there are things that I've done as a school board member, which is the job he's interviewing for, that's relevant versus to speak to what I do in my professional life. So the other thing is, I guess the other criticism is, and again, I think both candidates spoke to things that they'd bring, and I think that's fair for the voters to judge about what they would bring. The thing I would say is that you know, what voters should consider is what we actually have done. And time again, when PPS faced challenges or students faced challenges, whether it was when the district was shortchanging high schools students from having a full school day, I built a citywide coalition, and eventually we filed a complaint with the Department of Education, and the Department of Education ordered that PPS had to correct that deficiency. And, you know, students who had been having mandated late arrival, early dismissal, double lunch periods, because of my work with other parents in the Portland Parents Coalition, high school students got a full day of school, and I'm really proud of that. And you know, I feel like I've been accountable, and I have made mistakes. I think every person who in elected office who says they haven't made a mistake or had things they couldn't have done better, is not being honest with themselves. And I count on other parents, the media, and a lot of other people to hold me accountable, and they do.
Max, did you want to respond?
Well, I didn't mean to offend her by saying she's a corporate lobbyist. I mean, you can Google it and you see it. So I'm going off the research that I have, and I don't want, like you said, I wouldn't own it. Am I a stay-at-home dad? Was I? Yes. Am I a reading tutor? Yes. The decisions she's made have impacted my family. What would I do differently? And she was saying I wasn't involved in working with parents. Well, at Vestal, when I was the PTA vice president there, Portland was going through the whole DBRAC boundary decision. And there was a major divide within our school versus people who wanted to keep it a K-8 and those who didn't want to get it. So all the chaos with that. Lots of friends lived in Roseway Heights at the time that was a K-8. And they wanted to keep it a K-8, and we were coming in there and felt like invaders. So the district put us kind of against each other. I have lots of ideas on how the Portland School Board can run better. And I can talk about some of those.
Well,
first off,
let's
yeah.
do that. Let's start so I can get some questions that others have time to
Yeah,
for as well.
Absolutely.
What's your top priority for the next year?
The next year, well, the top two priorities will obviously be like what Julia was talking about. We're transitioning out of COVID. So we're going to have to find a way to get kids back into school and make sure those gaps are dealt with, and see if we have the funding, like what funding is there to make that happen. And do we want to have some of the elements of comprehensive distance learning still there? Because who knows where this pandemic, everyone's getting vaccinated, hopefully it goes down, but we're going to have a contingency. The second one is the achievement gap, and really focusing on the fact that less than 6% of 8th graders right now are ready for high school and are ready for career. And that's according to the board's own stats. So we've got to change the culture at the schools. I've been in David Douglas, Reynolds, various different schools. And I feel like the biggest difference is when you enter a Portland public school is it's what's wrong with you. And when you enter other schools, it's what's expected of you. And I think that's a mold within a culture that can be clearer. And then also when we're communicating to the public what the strategic plan is. Part of the reason you don't have to be a professional auditor to realize that PPS's website is horrible, confusing for parents. You want to see student achievement? Click on the page, it's not there. If we can't teach kids to read and write and do math at a level, or present a website or a strategic plan that isn't 52 pages long and gives no mention to reading, math, and science goals, then the public isn't going to listen or trust. And those are things that, it's the simple things that I think the board can help the district do better to demonstrate to the public that we're good stewards of the money.
So closing the achievement gap, I mean, that's been a goal of pretty much anyone who's ever run for anything, right?
Absolutely.
Can you get more specific about how you would actually close that achievement gap?
Yeah, well, we've got to get, I'm biased because I'm a reading tutor, but you've got to get 3rd graders reading. We've got to get them to read by third grade, because if they're not, fourth grade, you learn up to third grade, you learn to read, and then it's reading to learn. I think that service needs to be stated clearly in every school, that we need reading to be, it's just fundamental. I think the middle school experience isn't equitable. I'm really concerned about the fact that I have a daughter in 7th grade, has never taken a foreign language class, hasn't written a book report for school. She was a tag kid for language arts, and I met with a tag coordinator at the open house, but there's no tag curriculum. The only thing we got from that was we could advocate that she doesn't have to listen to a story when she reads it. We have to set a bar of excellence for students. So specifically, let's state that reading is a problem. Let's look at the stats. Like when you see 6%, we've got to make that a goal to the student body and to every teacher, that we've got to raise those standards. I think that would be a culture change for the district, instead of some of the things that they're focused on. Like we have to stay focused on academics as well.
Where do you, if you're saying that we need to refocus on academics, where do you think the focus has gone wrong before? Or where do you think it's wrong right now?
I don't like the social emotional learning stuff that is, taking over in the school curriculum. Just the change that I witnessed in 3 years at Vestal, this is a personal experience, but I think it speaks to what other parents have seen. The first year, it was everybody do IXL, and they had hours of the kids who did IXL online and really encouraging them to do the math and the reading. And, my daughter kind of latched onto that. Lots of kids in the school really liked it. And then by the second year, it started to move towards a restorative justice sort of perspective, and IXL was no longer even offered through the school. So we couldn't do that stuff online. So I think we've got to prioritize, that all kids want to do well in school. I grew up and primarily went to Black schools in East Hills and Pittsburgh, and in middle school, had lots of Black teachers, lots of Black students, and everybody can do well at school. You've got to set the expectations, make it predictable. And part of the reason that I had to take my daughter out of Vestal was I was seeing David Douglas, same demographics, and not the same chaos that was going on in a classroom. And she wasn't coming back, students weren't getting scratches and not wanting to read anymore because of what was happening in the classroom. I don't want to make it all that personal, but I think it's got to be an academic focus. Like when you come to school, you come here to learn. We're going to provide the food, predictable curriculum, engaging classrooms. We have counseling if you need it, and all those services. But we are here to learn and to get you guys to your next level in life.
So it seems like you're advocating more for a more classic type of education rather than sort of this way we've been moving, and incorporating more kind of social justice, restorative justice, asking how they're feeling emotionally.
I'm fine with asking. I think good teachers do that naturally. I have a problem with the fact that we're funding that through Castle, these big corporate social emotional learning companies. I mean, it's a business. Like, let's be clear. Like when you look, I have it on my website. Look, people get worried about standardized testing. Look at the social emotional learning test that the school district asks your kids. There's 13 questions on bullying, and what specifically are you bullied about? And I can run down those for you if you want. But I have a real problem with the way Castle is. And if I can't trust the school district to teach my kids how to read, write, do math, and do science, as a parent, I don't trust them to do social emotional learning as like a stated curriculum. Teachers have always cared for kids. Schools always care for kids. That's just a natural performance. In my opinion, that should be what schools do.
Julia, do you want to respond to that about the focus of what learning should be?
Well, I think your original question was about the achievement gap. Do you want me to respond to like his answer or the question, because he also talked about his daughter?
I think the thing I'm a little bit more interested in hearing you respond to is more about kind of the education model of how it seems like, you know, Max is saying PPS has gotten a little bit soft about education and is, you know, kind of catering or coddling kids a little bit. How do you feel about that?
I think we need to care for all of our students, especially coming up. This has been a super challenging year. You know, I was in at Franklin yesterday, Sunnyside earlier in the week, and Jason Lee last week. And this, you know, just students and school staff across the board are, I think, in a really fragile state. I mean, people who have been working all year on site, nutrition service workers, it's, you know, they had to show up for work. So I want to just start by saying, you know, I think I wouldn't describe it as coddling. I think we need to care for our students. And one of the things that we do know is that we absolutely need to offer a rigorous academic curriculum, but we also need for our students, our Black, Indigenous, students of colors, special ed students, and our emerging English language learners, they do need care, and they also need supports. And that's why we've invested in more counselors, more social workers. And I wouldn't call that coddling. I would call that supporting our students. And I know that many of our students in the wake of the national racial reckoning that we're having really are lending their voices to how they're treated in the schools, and that students of color are disproportionately disciplined and subject to out of school suspensions and expulsions, and therefore taking them completely out of the classroom. And that introducing, which we've done, things like restorative justice allows students to not only be not be removed from the classrooms, but also addressing any harm that's happened, is a much better way and much more supportive of our students, especially students who, students of color in our district who haven't had those supports. So I just have maybe a different take from Max. Certainly those things aren't a substitute for a rigorous academic curriculum, and I think we're seeing that across the board. I'm really appreciative that the voters last November approved the bond, because one of the things that part of the bond that, I mean, there were a lot of things in it, but one thing that I feel is going to be hopefully transformative support is that we're going to get updated and culturally relevant curriculum K through 12 in all subjects. And we haven't had that probably since Measure 5 passed. So those are all things that I think are important supports for our students and are complementary to a rigorous academic model that all of our students and framework that all of our students should have access to.
Libby, I want to have you get a chance to speak here. Can you talk about what your top priorities would be if elected for the next year?
Yeah, I mean, in relation to the achievement gap, I think unfortunately we have a lot of administrators and teachers that are leaving high poverty schools. And if we could have the opportunity to give them better training, additional pay, anything to merge that gap, that is substantial. But yeah, communications is a #1 priority for me too, because I noticed just running communications within our K through 8 school for PTA, how difficult that can be to access, you know, every parent, or to figure out ways to to actively communicate with so many different types of people speaking many different types of languages. But Portland Public Schools has had translation services for a long time. We had Portland Public Schools has a printing facility. I think that in addition to the public forums, even if those have to be online forums, I think we need to hear from the community more. And I don't think that we're engaging them enough. And they are the stakeholders that are passing these bonds. I mean, whether or not you're a homeowner or not, you're, you know, if you're a renter, it gets passed on to you through your landlord. Um, but it's important to, yeah, some accountability. And I really do think that, yeah, lending additional training to administrators and teachers in high poverty schools should be a #1 priority for Portland Public Schools right now.
Libby, I wanted to ask you before we get to closing remarks. I'm just curious. You're endorsed by ED 300, which is a group that, to my understanding, has advocated really strongly for a return to in-classroom instruction, or at least a more aggressive hybrid model, if not entirely in-classroom instruction. Can you tell me why you got their endorsement?
Yeah, I accepted their endorsement, and I'll tell you what I told them. I was not expecting Governor Brown actually to come back and be like, and with the announcement that she wanted everyone to return to schools. They were one of the first people I spoke to. But what I told them was like, yeah, I do believe for social emotional health of students and teachers that we return full time in the fall. In terms of this hybrid model, yeah, my daughter's going to school right now. Some people's students are not. It is a personal decision, whether it's the students or the adults for right now. But in regards to what I told them, I think it is for the health of everyone. And assuming by then, our vaccination rates are going to be much higher by fall, that it's not unreasonable to expect a return. And then, yeah, I wasn't strongly embracing their push for hybrid or whatever they were pushing for, but this is what I told them. I do believe this is what we should do for the fall.
Great, that's a helpful answer. I
Yeah.
like understanding why people are endorsed by organizations if it's mentioned in the pamphlet.
And you're for sure not the first person I've been asked this plenty lately.
Sure.
So thank you.
No problem. Let's do closing arguments. Max, can you tell us why we should endorse you on Wednesday?
I think people want representation of the people. I'm running a $100 campaign. I built my website myself, www.maxmargolis.org. I'm a unique person. I've worked with schools. I had an after-school film project. So I've worked with students directly. But in terms of why Willamette Week should endorse me, it's because we need a new direction. And I think I can offer that. I have plans for addressing the achievement gap, improving the website, putting students first in everything we do, clear communication. I feel like Portland Public, the board, it's very difficult for citizens to understand the direction that the district is going in, and to call nonsense when you see it. And the fact that tax dollars went to the reimagined plan of Portland is an alarming thing, and the board's pictures all over it. And that company, we're the only school district that I can find in the state that it has a branded strategic plan. And that company, Prospect Studio, made almost an identical plan for a school district in California. I don't think that's good leadership. And I think you need to have somebody there to stop the groupthink. And I'm sort of an introverted person, but I read the materials that come out of the district. And I think to have that sort of representation would be unique for the board, and someone who wants to cooperate and make sure that we're moving in that direction and can convey to the public, hey, this is our reading goals for this year. This is what we want to see third graders and fifth graders and eighth graders at these key benchmarks, and set it and have quarterly reports as a board that we sit on, and then we go back to the public with, because other school districts all over the country, school boards all over Oregon do it that way. There's templates to do it. Portland is doing it wrong. And I really think that auditor's report is clear that there's some basic steps that we can take as a district to be more transparent and efficient with how we communicate with the public. And that's what I would argue for if I were a member of the school board. And I think that's a good thing.
Thank you, Max. Libby, can you give us your closing argument?
Student engagement needs to be number one, and it doesn't matter, should not matter what color you are. But we have let down our students of color, and we need to remedy this as quickly as possible. And I commend the district for, their future opening of the Center for Black Student Excellence. But how are we going to make that better work for the community? And is the community actively being engaged around that? Yes, ongoing communication is extremely important. I would also like the district to scrap the MAP test, even if it was in favor of another type of testing. I think that this is psychologically harming to some students and inappropriate. I was extremely dissatisfied that the district went forward in utilizing the MAP test during distance learning, because they're in an extremely difficult time right now. I imagine like how difficult it is for some adults right now, but it's, even though children are resilient, they need the focus to be on like their betterment. And I disagree with the use of this tool. But yeah, number one needs to be student engagement. And I think we've lost sight of that. I think, district administrators make too much money, and that also should be reassessed.
Great, thank you. Julia, can you give us your closing argument for why we should endorse you this Wednesday?
Adding cleanup. So I think the Willamette Week should endorse me because, and I hope voters will support my election on May 18th. I've spent 2 decades fighting for students and working to improve our schools as a parent and board member. I've been student focused, courageous, independent, empathetic, effective. I have a track record of working with parents and staff, even those who I don't necessarily or haven't agreed with, but working with them to make things better for our students, and also prioritizing resources for Black, Indigenous, and students of color. I also have been a board member that's been unafraid to ask the really tough questions. If you watch board meetings, I thoroughly prepare. I ask critical questions. I demand high quality data and recommendations for the work that's done. And I'm not afraid to hold administrators accountable. And I think people will tell you that. Yeah, we also need somebody who will keep a sharp eye on the budget and the tax dollars that are given. We have over $1 billion budget, and I'm the only person in the race who has experienced managing and overseeing a large budget. Also, I've been, because of my work with schools, I think I have earned the endorsement and support of a really broad and diverse group of leaders, from Governor Barbara Roberts to all 5 of the Multnomah County Commissioners, Stand for Children. I've been endorsed by the school board leaders of color who have served. Current Director Michelle DePass, Julia Esparza Brown, former Director Lorenzo Poe. And also because of my work in auditing and really performance management, I've been endorsed by Gary Blackmore, who I think is the only person in state history who's been the city, the county, and the state, the primary state auditor. And I'm also proud to have been endorsed by lots of parents and educators because of the work I've done. The stakes are high for our students right now as we recover from COVID and we transition to go back to school this fall. And I think now is the time to for voters and Willamette Week to stick with somebody who has a track record of really effective leadership and work across the school district to make our schools better. So thank you for the time today. And again, I appreciate Libby and Max stepping up for a really important community job.
Great, thank you. At the end of these interviews, we always have a fun question that at least is fun for us. And in the spirit of everybody being stuck at home for the past year and desperate to go somewhere, I'm going to ask you each to tell us what your favorite field trip as a student was. So search back in your memories. What was your best field trip? Anybody can go first.
Okay. I will say in Spanish class in middle school, we got to go to Cedar Point, which was an amusement park in Sandusky, Ohio. And, we had to go to school super early at like 4:30 in the morning or something. A Spanish teacher got us on the bus and we got to go to Cedar Point. That was a fantastic field trip. And like the kids that I went with on that, it's just a great memory. That's what came to mind right away.
No, that makes
when you
sense.
asked the
Well,
question.
I'm trying to figure out what the possible educational argument for attending Cedar Point would have been.
I would, you might have to ask the teacher, but it was fun.
No, I'm
maybe
sure.
that was
My answer to this question would be when I was a kid, we went on a field trip to SeaWorld.
Oh, nice.
But at least SeaWorld, I think you can make the argument that there's some marine science education occurring.
Well, maybe Gravity or something, with the roller coasters, but I don't know.
Julia, you got one?
I have two, and I'm going to see if Libby has had the similar experience. So one of them was going to Fran's Bakery, which is right across from Benson. I think like in second grade, we went there. I still have the ruler from our trip there. It's just like, it was amazing to see bread mass produced. I mean, I think as a 7-year-old, but probably the more educational one was going up to Bonneville Locks and watching the salmon migration and better understanding sort of the whole ecosystem that we live in, or just how amazing nature is, and to watch the salmon go upstream.
Great. Libby?
It's funny because actually I was going to go with two also, and Fran's was actually one of them. And partially because, I think I went as a third grader or something. And then I got to attend again as a parent chaperone for my daughter's field trip to France. And that was fascinating because I got to see how much more production they were dealing with in that time period of 20-ish years, and how amazing that was and what they were all producing. And I thought it was, I was impressed by how they were able to increase their production as greatly as they had. But yeah, for a bigger Portland as well. And my other one being Alpenrose Dairy, because
I bet
we got to milk the cows, which they haven't allowed for quite some time. But yeah, that connection to, having that agricultural experience, being a city kid, is so important. Because a number of my friends growing up who were not white, they had never even left the city in some conditions. Like they hadn't even been to the gorge. They hadn't even been to the coast. Like those types of opportunities just had not existed in their world. And so, being able to have that connection close by to the city of agriculture, the connection to outdoor school too, and outdoor school providing that as well.
Yeah.
The ultimate field trip.
But and thank you all for the opportunity to interview today. And thank you to Max and Julia as well.
Well, thank you to all of you. I really appreciate it. I'm going to turn the recording off and